Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this album review. It is time to tackle the 7th studio album by long-running Canadian hard rock legends 3 Days Grace, one of my favorite bands of all time. This one is entitled Explosions, their first album in 4 years, the longest turnaround for a new album since their mainstream genesis in 2003 with their self-titled album. Of course, the last album being 2018's Outsider, which I thought was a phenomenal album, one of the best they've ever done, especially considering their 2015 album Human, which was their first with new lead singer Matt Walsh, first without founding frontman Adam Gonche. After that album kind of split the band's fan base into two camps, in my opinion, and saw them kind of starting over by default because they had no choice. I thought Outsider was a really welcomed and well performed statement of this is a new, fresh incarnation of 3 Days Grace that could succeed, despite the rather large shadow that Adam Gonche left behind. But yeah, they seem to have what I thought was a tradition of releasing albums every 3 years, and they broke it with this one. But after 4 long years, we are finally back with Explosions. This album was preceded by the release of the single So Called Life, and my opinions on that song have not really changed since I reviewed it back in November when it came out. So Called Life is a kind of melting pot of the band's best attributes, marrying the electronic influences of their last three albums with their trademark streamlined mainstream rock sound on the chorus. That's not to say they don't have a few tricks up their sleeve this time. Neil Sanderson pounds away on the drums and adds touches of emphasis and accentuation every chance he gets, and the keys on the final chorus are simply mesmerizing. It's also nice to see the band with a chip on their shoulder. The lyrics are, of course, influenced by the turmoil of the last 2 years, and I'll still defend them on this front. It may be surface level to some, the lyrical content, but you can't deny it's from the heart. I Am the Weapon follows suit, Matt Walsh questioning authority, but not in the juvenile way he's accustomed to. This track is also armed with a chorus that subverts expectations, trading their usually melodic chorus layout for a drum-led call and response sort of jaunt. It's tough it's tough to quantify the nuances of the next track, Neurotic, featuring Lucas Rossi, because it seems like there's a foot in every camp. The chorus conjures up reminders of Matt Walsh's former band My Darkest Days, and Rossi kind of sounds like a Wish.com Ben Burley from Breaking Ben, a bit derivative of where this band has gone before, competently performed, but nothing new to add to the 3 Days Grace canon. Now, do I detect steel guitar on Lifetime? I mean, I certainly welcome a shift in paradigm stylistically, because this couldn't be any different from the rest of the band's discography, and Matt Walsh does nail his vocal runs. And while we're still in this opening sector of the album, we've already seen the band take quite a bit of chances. A Scar is Born invokes a sense of nostalgia. The production glistens with similitudes to popular rock sounds from an era gone by, and the chorus is another serving, in my opinion at least, of My Darkest Day style sound, but it's greatly elevated by Walsh's improved vocals. You can tell how much his voice has improved over the course of his nearly 10 years with 3 Days Grace thus far. And then Souvenirs opens up with one of the most honestly profound and vulnerable passages 3 Days Grace has ever brought to life. Now, of course, the cynics out there will say those kind of moments don't exist, and therefore I'm not saying much, but these words really stick. There's nothing more beautiful than a distant star, proof of our ignorance, proof of how small we are. Remember getting high on the hood of my broke down car. Remember how innocent we no longer are. It's a stark contrast to Matt's first two albums with the band. Back then, he relished in being the juvenile rule breaker whose personality and his voice was just present enough to still make you root for him anyway. But here it seems like a kid all grown up, coming to grips with the cold truths about the world. Performance wise, it takes a while to get going before the composition really erupts, as the band continues to brush against the brevity of life in a way they haven't since World So Cold. No Tomorrow is that song's successor, both literally and spiritually, continuing to drive home the message of living life to the fullest that invokes sweet reminders of life starts now. Matt does sound a bit white on the verses, so fair warning on that front, but the chorus is pretty infectious, extending an olive branch to the listener that doesn't simply help them, but is also fun to listen to at the same time. Redemption plays like previous album highlight Nothing to Lose But You. It sees Matt longing for recompense with a nameless muse. The songwriting is solid, and the performance mostly satisfies, though at times Matt sounds a tad boyish. Is it just a coincidence that the opening guitar riff kind of sounds like the opening riff from I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys? I don't know, I just feel like I've heard this riff before. but still, that's only a nominal indictment, if anything. And then Champion's wacky intro will wake you up if you find yourself taking a snooze or losing interest. And I don't necessarily mean that as a positive, because I will admit that intro kind of made me cringe a little bit. What is it with these mainstream bands singing about being champions? Like, goddamn, I love 3 Days Grace to death, but please don't bend the knee to the pitfall so easily, though the imagery on the chorus redeems it a little bit. Chain of Abuse is another one that I feel like is a rehash of past ideas. In this case, Bully from White Starts Now. Once again, it's performed well enough that I can't quarrel with it that much. And where this track differentiates that, Matt is offering help and friendship to the listener rather than just making observations from a distance. Someone to Talk To features the Finnish metal heavyweights Apocalyptica, their first collab with someone from the 3 Days Grace camp since 2008's I Don't Care with Adam Gonche. Such a great song, by the way. This time, Matt Walsh is the one who needs help, continuing the more mature character arc, so to speak, that he's established over the course of this record. Apocalyptica adds some poignant violin fills all throughout the track, making it one of the most stylistically diverse 3 Days Grace has ever done, even if the song ends kind of abruptly with no fanfare. And then the title track, Explosions, closes the album the way the title suggests. Plenty of inertia in the instrumentals, especially from Brad Walst on bass and Barry Stock on guitar. Matt Walst relies on the elements to enhance the imagery. There's no reason not to have a little fun. One more trip around the sun. And then Explosions ends there. So overall, what do we have? Again, it's not perfect, and this band does seem to have a tendency of rehashing a lot of past ideas. It feels like almost half the tracks on this album were done before. It feels like they are tending a little bit too often for my taste on ideas that they've already touched base on, and it feels like watered down versions of past songs. I certainly can't fault them for like recognizing what works and sticking to it, but even in spite of that, this does feel like the most unique and the most stylistically diverse, as I mentioned with the song Someone to Talk To. As I mentioned with that song in particular, the whole album in general does feel like the most stylistically diverse they've ever done. It does feel, the most independent of their past work. It seems like they're trying to take chances, so it's weird. We have, on one hand, you have a tendency to rehash old ideas, on the other hand, trying hard as they can to create new opportunities and add new elements and add new ideas to the formula. And so you have this kind of conflicting phenomena, so to speak. These two things kind of converging, and the end result is the album Explosions. Time will tell how this album stacks up to their back catalog. Of course, I don't think this band will ever top the heights of 1X and Life Starts Now. Those are two of my favorite albums of all time. And I think this album is probably better than Human, but I don't think it's better than Outsider, and I don't even think it's better than their self-titled from 2003. It's definitely better than Transit of Venus. So, again, time will tell how this album stacks up, but for now, I am giving Explosions by 3 Days Grace a 4 out of 5. So, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notified next time a video goes up. We will see you again next time.